Story 1. I worked up north in oil and gas doing site facility maintenance, and I started the job when the boom was happening. But we soon started down the backside and cuts were made. In order to cut costs, they cut our overtime, our hours, took away our flights because it was fly in and fly out, and generally made life miserable. I could see the writing on the wall, and I was an unticketed carpenter, so I decided to go back to school and get my GM papers. Before I went on my school break, we got a new journeyman, and he asked us how we can live on X amount of wages and pay for our flights as well. We told him that our wages are X plus 10. The company was paying new hires about $10 an hour less than us, which explained why they were trying to get people to quit so that they could replace them with cheaper labor. I had arrangements to do third and fourth year altogether, but as my school date was coming up, they started talking about putting off my year 4, screwing me around. It took me over a year waiting to get into that class, so I wasn't going to put it off. I decided to quit if they screwed me, but I didn't tell them. So this is near the end of the calendar year, and school was November/December for year 3 and January/February for year 4. The first thing that I did was to schedule 100% of my dental benefits for December, me and my 2 kids. I also scheduled whatever else we could do dentally for the new year, early January. We also had a Visa account that was $1,000 per year for health spending. You could use it at the dentist for whatever wasn't covered, pharmacy, optometrist, those kinds of things. So I went to Joe's Optometry and bought some sweet reading glasses that had a picture of a horse with a guy with a stick and a little ball on it. I also got every bell and whistle for the lenses. Perfect customer. That is not the compliance, though. The salesperson, bless her soul, offered me sunglasses, and I said I couldn't do that. It's only for health. She told me the insurance company doesn't get itemized receipts. They just see Joe's Optical for X amount of dollars. Oh yeah, I'm in with some sweet Ray-Bans with 2 pairs of polarized lenses. No problem. So the company I worked for had a bunch of contracts, and there were about 800 employees in total. I'd say about 60% of them were single male, about 10% females, and the rest married guys. We had a junior Sparky who was all about bling, so I told him he can go to the optometrist with his card and get sunglasses. I told everyone on our shift, screw them, free sunglasses. I might not have overtime anymore, but thanks for the sunglasses. And waited. And nothing happened. I was expecting everyone to be sending messages thanking me for the loophole, but nothing. So I showed my Sparky the receipt and my Visa card number to prove that I had done it. Next day, I saw him on Facebook with a new pair of sunglasses, saying that he had also ordered some limited edition Ferrari sunglasses from his local optometrist. Initially, he didn't believe me, but now he was all in. I picked Sparky because he was about bling, but he was also with the company since day 1, and he knew absolutely everyone, including people on the other job sites. 800 people. Back to me. Because of the turnaround schedule, I was scheduled to go back to work somewhere around January 10th after they had unilaterally changed the deal. In school, we weren't allowed to miss days, so my kids and I had all of our dental work done in the Christmas break on the January side. Lucky for me. I also asked the dentist if I could pay it forward and pay for 2 cleaning sessions sometime in the next year. I used our Visa health card. What was left I went back to the optometrist and I got 2 more pairs of sunglasses. I used up my Visa card and my yearly dental allowance in the first week of January. I officially quit the day before they forced me back to work. My coworkers told me in the middle of January there was a company-wide meeting about sweeping changes to the benefit program. They were changing companies to become more streamlined, and the benefits naturally were sharply decreased. The Visa health card vanished. My guess is because they had a $500,000 optometry bill. I finished school in the top 3 and happily had $10,000 worth of dental and $2,000 worth of sunglasses and glasses paid for in the last week of December and first week of January. Not only do I wear my sunglasses at night, but the future's so bright, I gotta wear shades. Story 2. When I was in my early 20s, I worked at a supermarket. I should note that I was a pretty reliable employee. I was never late. In fact, I often got in early, and I rarely called in sick. At the time this happened, I had not called in sick for 9 months, and even then, the manager had sent me home. I had been up all night, swinging between burning hot and freezing cold, so I was obviously feverish, and I had been throwing up at both ends, shall we say. At one point at about 2 a.m., I was on the toilet, with my head in the sink, utterly miserable. I must have passed out because the next thing I knew I was lifting my head off the sink, and it was 7 a.m. I was due to start work at 12 that day, but that obviously wasn't going to happen. So I called up the manager. Let's call the manager Steve. Steve was known for being a real jerk. He never believed anyone who called in sick except his best buds, usually other managers, never lowly staff, but often called in sick himself. A lot of the time we knew it was because he was hungover and not actually sick. The conversation went as follows. "Hey Steve, sorry, I can't come in. I'm sick." "With what?" "I don't know. I think it might be the flu. I've been up all night being sick, and I have a fever." "Don't be stupid. If you had the flu, you'd be completely knocked out. I need you in. Come in or you're fired." "I can't. I just told you I can't stop vomiting. I passed out." Steve, growling angrily, "Either come in or bring a doctor's note, or you're fired." In the UK, you are legally allowed to self-certify for 5 days. This means you can tell your employer you are sick and you do not need a doctor's note. If you're sick for more than 5 days, you then need a note. It is also illegal to demand a doctor's note during the self-certify period. I knew this, but I was terrified. This was during the recession. I couldn't afford to lose my job, so I got myself dressed. Almost passed out trying to do so. Then trudged to the doctor's, some 25 minutes walk away. I ended up sitting in the doctor's office for a little over an hour, which for a walk-in was pretty good. I get in to see the doctor, and she is furious at me for coming in. "You're not supposed to come to the doctor's when you are ill," and of course I knew I should be able to self-certify. She told me as such, saying I shouldn't be here and should have stayed at home. I then explained what had happened with Steve and how he had threatened to fire me over this, and I couldn't afford to lose my job. I was struggling as it was. My doctor turned her anger towards my manager. She asked if I got sick pay from the company, and I said yes. "He wants a sick note, right?" the doctor says. "Okay, I'll give him a sick note." Now, my manager just wanted a note confirming I was sick, but instead my doctor wrote something along the lines of this. "X has come to the surgery because Steve has insisted she come in spite of the fact that this is illegal and all employees are allowed to self-certify. Due to being forced to make this unnecessary and highly dangerous trip when the patient is ill, has a fever of 39 degrees C, and almost passed out in the waiting room, I am signing her off for 2 full weeks to recover. Had she been allowed to self-certify as is the law, they might only have needed a few days, but due to straining themselves, they now require 2 full weeks. They are not to be permitted to work until date 2 weeks later." The doctor said she would have signed me off longer, but this was the longest she could do without requiring further evidence. So basically, instead of just being off for a few days, I was now signed off for a full 2 weeks, and I'd be paid for it. I went to my place of work, at which point one of the duty managers saw me and asked me what I was doing here and to go home. I was obviously very unwell. I explained what happened. They agreed to help me downstairs to Steve's office and went with me inside. I handed Steve the note. He looked worried and tried to say I wasn't being serious about firing you. Well, gee, when you angrily growled it down the phone, it sure sounded like it. The duty manager then declared that they were going to drive me home. It was clear Steve wanted to argue, but had the sense to know he shouldn't. The duty manager then drove me home, made sure I was okay, then went back to work where they informed our union rep of what had happened. Steve had a disciplinary hearing where he was given a severe reprimand and a warning. Steve tried to argue he never said I'd be fired and I was lying and just decided to go to the doctors. But the duty manager said they heard him admit to it when he said to me that he really didn't mean it. I felt better after a few days and enjoyed my 2 weeks off, fully paid, and enjoyed the nice weather we had. Meanwhile, Steve was forced to work overtime because we were short-staffed. So thanks to the doctor, instead of being off for a few days, I ended up getting a nice 2-week paid vacation, and Steve was given a final warning, all because he insisted I get a doctor's note. Story 3. So a bit of background. For my first job, I, 18-year-old female at the time, worked in the electronics section at Sears with a dress code that consisted of a dark blue polo shirt and khaki pants. I have been confused for an employee multiple times in multiple different stores since, and thankfully, every time has been pleasant overall, but the first time I was ever mistaken always stuck with me. A friend of mine was moving into her first apartment and had asked me on a day off to help her buy items she needed, as she didn't have her own car at that point. We drove around town a bit before we ended up at Sears as I could get her a discount, and I knew the layout of the store like the back of my hand. I was in a bright yellow and black paisley print blouse, skinny jeans, and heeled black boots. Very much not dress code, and even if it had been. My store had 2 stories with clothing items downstairs and appliances, mattresses, electronics, and auto upstairs. Point of this being, no employee on the second floor in their right mind would be wearing what I was to haul around heavy merchandise. So back to the story. My friend and I are upstairs looking at small appliances, microwaves, coffee makers, etc., and I'm frankly going more in depth than I probably needed to over which items to get and why, what complaints I've heard, which items get returned more, which brands have higher reviews or better customer service, if she needs to contact them, and so on. I wanted to make sure whatever we got she would enjoy and wouldn't come back to bite me on the rear. About halfway through my rant, I pieced together that 2 much older women have been following us through the section, and I turned to let them know if they need someone to help, that the appliance desk is only a couple seconds walk further down the main aisle, and someone is always there. They say they're fine, but continue to hover around us. At this point, I'm getting concerned and unsettled. My mom loved showing me articles of young teens being taken off the street as a ploy to prevent me from trying to go wild in my teens. So this whole setup had me unnerved to say the least, especially when added to the fact that the small appliances were technically part of the appliance section, but were separated by a wall and no one on shift could see us being followed around. We pick a coffee maker and are jokingly debating if she needs something else. Honestly can't remember what it was. Maybe a waffle iron. When she nods her head toward the way we come and I turn to see the 2 women still following us. I told them again that if they need help to go to the appliance desk, and actually had to look down at my outfit when they assured me no one else in my section would be as helpful as I am. I very quickly tried explaining I do technically work there, but I work in electronics and I'm not on the clock. One of the women still sweetly insisted that it's no trouble and they'll wait for me. The other woman seemed horrified before telling me she's so sorry and dragged her friend away. Short story, friend and I got followed through a store by women who refused to go to the desk for actual assistance. Story 4. Some backstory. My now passed-on next-door neighbor was a terribly busybody who felt it was her God-given right to tell everyone in our street what they could and couldn't do, from where they parked their cars to what flowers they could grow. She had to know everyone's business and would harass people until she got answers, even going as far as stalking, but that is for other stories. If she didn't get her own way, she would spread the most evil gossip. Her adult children, a son and a daughter, were both greedy and deeply entitled, believing that because the majority of the street were either social housing or rented properties, they were better than everyone else, and if they didn't get what they wanted, then Mother would sort it out. I have many stories about this neighbor far worse than this, but I will start off with this one, as it is the mildest thing she had done and fits into the entitled parent subreddit better. The son owns 2 other properties near the end of the street which he rents out. At the very end of the same street is another house with a plot of land right next to it. The owners of that house and land built a garage that they use for work, rebuilding old cars and bikes. The business is at least 30 years old, handed down from father to son. It's very small, so they can only work on 1 vehicle at a time. but due to the owner's skills at restoration, they are always in high demand. One day about 10 years ago, the son rocks up in his latest BMW and walks up to the owner, a father and his teenage son. The rest of this conversation is paraphrased as I was not a witness, but this was told to my family by the owners themselves. Son, hey guys, it's your lucky day. I want to buy your land. I will give you £15,000. Notice that he didn't ask if it was for sale or offer to negotiate a fair price. The owner, no, sorry, the business is not for sale. Thanks for the interest though. I wasn't asking for your business. You can set up somewhere else. I want this land. It's just the right size to build another house on. Well, sorry, no. This is our livelihood. We can't just move. We would lose business while looking for someplace else, and besides, it used to be my father's garage, and it's next door to our home, so why would we want to sell it? So you can make money. Insert a random duff face here. But we make money working here, so. Sorry, but it's not for sale. The son then does what you would expect a grown man of 30, yes, 30 to do. He complained to his mother. His mother takes no time at all to walk back to the garage. Entitled mother, why won't you sell your garage to my son? He wants to build a house here. The owner, because this is our place of business and we don't want to sell. You shouldn't even be working here. It's dangerous. I can assure you, ma'am, everything is up to code and we have every right to work here. Now please leave us alone. What are you hiding in there? Is it drugs? What? No, we are fixing up an old bike. I knew it. You are working here illegally. Sell your land to my son, or I will contact the authorities. The owner laughed and told her to go ahead. She stormed off, and they thought it was over. Just the crazy ravings of a mad granny, right? An hour later, sure enough, the police arrived. Apparently, an anonymous caller rang them to say that the owners had been dealing drugs out of the garage. It was obvious who had called them. Of course, all the neighbors had seen the police arrive. Our street is normally quiet, and we are all nosy jerks, so when you see a blue flashing light, you step out and watch the show unfold. Entitled mother took great glee in telling everyone standing around and watching the chaos how the owners had been selling drugs to children, and how she wasn't the one who called them, but everyone knows what is going on. And thank goodness something is finally being done about it. Half the neighbors were shocked at this event, but a few of the longer-term residents were already giving her the side eye like it was on special offer at Tesco or Walmart. She must have been feeling pretty smug with herself. Only there was a snag. Just a little one. Because the tiny garage worked on rare and old cars, which can be expensive, the owners had CCTV. That was something the entitled mother had not counted on. After the police had shown up, the owners knew who the culprit was and had no issue with showing footage, complete with sound to the officers, showing the entitled mother threatening to call the police if they didn't sell the land. With half the neighbors out and watching events unfold, the entitled mother's face switched from smugness to fear. As the police walked away from the garage and approached her instead, the officer then asked if they could step inside her home to discuss something she probably did not want her neighbors to hear. She received a warning regarding harassment and wasting police time. The owners of the garage were never bothered again, and the last remaining neighbors, who didn't know how bad she was, finally saw her for the witch she was. Story 5. Hey, so, this is my first time posting a story here, and while it's not the first time I've dealt with such people, this one was recent and still stands out. It's going to be a bit long, but that's more of how I tell stories than anything else. Some background info. I work at a local gaming store and hobby shop, one that sells card games, board games, tabletop RPGs, various Japanese imports, and other general nerdiness. We've been in the area for almost 20 years. I've been going to the shop for over 13, and I've worked there for probably about 10 years now. The shop is family-owned, and only recently have we started making some major upgrades and structure shifts to the store. We now have 2 people minimum on shift every day of the week. Woo! So, during the pandemic, We moved a lot of our inventory to be listed online. We started doing shipping of items. We started being able to order more stuff because we were selling more stuff, etc., etc. Also during the pandemic, as some of you may be aware, Pokemon cards have taken a huge upswing and become hard to find and extremely expensive. Pre-COVID, we were the premier spot for running Pokemon tournaments and to find Pokemon products. So the fact that we couldn't get in our usual orders was extremely hard on us and our community. The scarcity created by scalpers and the upheaval from our transformation in how we run the business caused some hiccups here and there, and this one was on the larger side. We had this guy order online from us a huge order of Pokemon stuff. We're gonna call him Professor because he had his own hoodies and swag with his actual nickname on all of it, which was kinda over the top in the way it self-advertised him. So, Professor orders a huge amount of Pokemon stuff from our online store, like $600 plus amount of stuff. But soon it becomes apparent that due to a major inventory issue, we were missing some items from his order. It came to about $200 that was not in our inventory, which isn't a small amount of money to have to refund. My manager, who will be referred to as manager, called up Professor and let him know that these items were missing from our inventory and that we were deeply sorry and would refund him his money for those items. Over the phone, he sounded calm and reasonable and said, "Okay, sure, I'll take the refund." So, manager puts through the refund for the items that were missing and sets aside the items we did have. They were all already paid for, so the professor would just have to come in and pick up the stuff. Well, manager had to go, and I was going to finish up the rest of the day. So he let me know that Professor would be coming into the store to pick up an order, and that we had to refund him a significant amount of money, but he seemed to be pretty reasonable. So, the day goes on for a little bit, and finally, Professor arrives. With him is his girlfriend and his minion. Professor was a large muscular guy, shaved head, and had all of his gear advertising himself. Girlfriend was chewing bubblegum, never said a word, and didn't make eye contact with anyone as she just stood around. Minion was shorter and a bit out of shape, his hunched-over posture making him look smaller, and his timid attitude all added up to someone who was trying to disappear. I greet them with my usual, "Hey, welcome, can I help you find anything?" Professor turns to me and says that he ordered some stuff, and I figured, oh, okay, this is him. So I make sure the name on the order matches what the guy says it should be, pull it out front and hand it to him. He seems pleasant and happy enough right now, and says thanks. He then goes on to see what else we have in the store that he could buy. As he's looking through our Pokemon products and bringing stuff up to the counter, piling it up higher and higher, he takes a moment to check his phone and says, "Hey, not to be rude, but where's my refund?" I ask him to clarify, and he tells me that his refund isn't in his account. I go through to our side of things and see, yeah, the refund has been put through by the manager, and that now it would take a day or 3 to show up in his bank account, as refunds tend to do. I explain to him, and even show him, yes, we have put through the refund, and now it will take some time to wait for it to fully go through. He starts to pace, and his voice starts getting shaky and louder, saying that that's his money, and that we are stealing from him. I try to calmly explain to him that, yes, it is his money, we have put in the refund, and he will be getting it in a few days. At this point, it's out of our hands and depends on his bank. He starts to suggest that, okay, stop the refund and just give me the money in cash. I explain to him that now that the refund is processed on our side, we can't stop it and he'll have to contact his bank, but he wasn't having it. He goes through a bunch of suggestions, some of which are illegal, some of which don't actually result in any change in the situation, some of which would be outright theft from the register. He says that our business, our mom and pop run local gaming store, is really unprofessional for false advertising products that you don't have, when it was an honest error on our part of putting in the wrong number for our inventory. Eventually, he demands to speak to my boss, and I comply. I called my boss, the big boss, the store owner and the one who started the shop. We'll call her Boss Mom. She was in line at a store with her 2 kids when I called, and she asked what was up, and I told her the situation, That professor had ordered some stuff, some of which we didn't have. We put through the refund that he was offered and accepted, and now he is upset that the refund hasn't gone through yet. I end up handing the phone over to Professor, and before Boss Mom would even have the chance to say anything, he is ranting and raving about how unprofessional this store is, and that we would be losing a valuable customer because of this. He yelled about how he regularly spends $1,000 over at another gaming store that's 10 towns over. Eventually, Boss Mom gets a word in edgewise and tells him the following. We are sorry that we didn't have the product you ordered, and we're sorry that the refund is going to take a bit, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store. At the moment, we have done everything we can, and there isn't anything else we can do at this time. I'm glad you have another store that you can go to buy Pokemon. But just from the way you spoke to me over the phone, I do not want your patronage. Please exit the store, or I will call the cops. He ends up hanging up on her, grabs the bag of stuff he ordered, and storms out, all the while going on about how we are a terrible business, and he's going to buy us out and fire all of us, that we gave such terrible customer service. His girlfriend, who just stood in the same place the whole time without saying a word, then walks out behind him. And then Minion, who had actually vanished from sight, reappeared with a single Snickers bar, very silently places it on the counter with a $1 bill, and then walks outside after making his purchase, looking for all the world like he was going to die of embarrassment. And that was the last we heard of Professor. Except he literally called the store 30 minutes later to say that he was going to get me fired. I tried to interject and tell him that there's nothing else that I can do for him at this time. But then he says the curse thing. You know, I'm an old friend of Boss Dad, and I'm going to make sure you're fired for the terrible service you gave me. This is absurd for multiple reasons. Boss Dad isn't the one in charge here. That'd be Boss Mom. If he was friends with Boss Dad, he'd not only know that, but he'd know that he just talked to Boss Mom on the phone. Professor had never once stepped foot in our store before that day. I had not only never seen Professor before that day, but had not even seen him once at the couple hundred events that Boss Mom and Boss Dad would hold all the time, where they invite practically everyone. So, before I could even stop myself, I can't help but utter the words nonsense. Yeah, I'm good friends with him, and once he finds out how you treated me, you're going to be fired. I tell him good luck with that, and not to call us again, or I will consider it harassment, and hang up. So, the rest of the details are a bit more unclear, as this is stuff Boss Mom dealt with. But he at some point the next 2 days tries to call up the bank that has the mortgage for the building we are in an attempt to buy the building. Because our store is pretty successful and makes a good income, the mortgage is being paid for regularly, isn't in default, and can't be bought, or something like that. I don't know what the full details are or how any of this works. He also called Boss Mom's and Boss Dad's personal cell phone numbers to complain, not realizing that he had already talked to Boss Mom. Eventually, Boss Mom made him aware that if he were to try and contact her family, her business, or her employees, she would press charges for harassment and ultimately, that shut him up. Bonus info. When Boss Dad heard about this, and that Professor claimed to be an old friend of his, he laughed and told me, if my own dad came in and talked to my employees like that, I'd kick him out and tell him off. That guy is no friend of mine. Story 6. Alright, so I work in customer service for a company that deals in household furniture, specifically anything that needs plumbing or electricity. My boss frequently says, "Nah, screw them," when asked if we're able to fulfill backwards requests. We're also 99% recommended and rated by customers, so this genuinely isn't bad service, we just don't deal with jerks. So, enter entitled jerk, who had bought items that were either out of stock due to a shipping delay because of the coronavirus, or B, able to be shipped to her next day. She had a hefty discount, think 50% off or so. Automated email. Hi entitled jerk. This is in reference to your order with us for item X. The item is out of stock due to the shipping delay, but we can send that on as soon as it's in the country at no cost to you. We can delay the full order until then. or we can cancel the order for a full refund. What would you like to do? Contact us on company phone number or respond to this email. Entitled Jerk. This is awful service. You haven't even asked how I'm doing today. Your company delayed my items on purpose because I canceled my last order with you. Me. I can assure you we didn't do that, but if you'd like me to send on every other item, I can do that for you and have it there for the original delivery date. Not good enough. I might as well cancel. Okay, I can cancel it. I don't want to cancel it. Then I can get it to you with the other items, or we can have all of it delivered together. I want my items now. Okay, I can upgrade your delivery for free to the next day for every other item. I want my items and I want a full refund. Are you an idiot? Do you know what full refund means? What I actually say is, I understand that you're upset by this delay, but we're currently trying to get it to you as soon as possible despite the coronavirus stopping the shipping routes we use. You're trying to give me a coronavirus-infected item. The shipping route we use is currently delayed due to the virus. The item has not been near the outbreaks. Your company is trying to make me and hard-working British people like me sick with some virus. Cancel my full order. Can you confirm you would like me to cancel the full order and issue you a refund for all the items? Yes, I don't want anything you've touched. Okay, your refund is X and will be with you in a few days. Did you cancel my order? As requested, yes. I want to speak to your manager right now. Here's where I pulled my boss over and showed him. He shrugged and said, "Screw them. Her cancellation is in writing." So the boss calls the entitled jerk a few hours later. Boss, hello. He got interrupted by the jerk. I was harassed into responding to a personal email while I am at work because your employee would not stop messaging me. And I was missold the items because I was never told the items I ordered came from China and are going to make me sick. And then your employee canceled my order without asking me and is refusing to do anything about it. Ma'am, I can assure you that is not what happened. The email was sent to make you aware of the situation. It did not mean you needed to respond immediately. He explains the shipping route and health and safety thing again. I demand a refund. You're being refunded for the canceled order. And the refund for my time. I'm at work right now. I understand that, but you chose to engage with us by responding to the emails and have kept up the correspondence as well as requested my time. I'm also at work, and this is stopping me from being able to do the bulk of my job. Will you refund me for my time? What? Due to the cancellation being in writing earlier, we have canceled this order for you, which we are unable to reverse, and will need you to place another order for the items you want, without the discount, if you would like to receive them. Either you have the items delivered together, have it delivered separately, or keep it canceled. Which do you want? Separately. But I want the free upgraded delivery. I'm afraid that was taken off of the table when you accused my employee of lying to you, so now pay extra.